Hey, this is Edward. Hope you're doing well. And I wanted to create a video today on SBA 7A loans. And as of today, mid-November 2025, SBA 7A loans are back in business just because there was a short government shutdown in US. And this video is going to be for US buyers that are looking to buy or acquire businesses all across US. So this is a very predictable mechanism. It's called SBA 7A. It's a loan program that you can leverage to um, get a loan as far as your business acquisition. So they're back in business as of right now, and you can actually go and apply and get a loan. So let me just quickly go over the basic concept related to the SBA 7A loan and how you can leverage this to be able to buy a business. What's interesting is if you have particular operational experience in a field or you have experience in business in any field, what you could do is you can go and buy a company like that is potentially already successful, making millions of revenue, 10, 20, 30% profit margin, and you could actually find a business like that locally, and you can then go and leverage the SBA 7A loan to buy into that company. Typically, these businesses will have retiring baby boomers as owners, and they're going to be looking to retire. So if they're looking for somebody who's experienced, understanding their business model, and who can add value, maybe even integrate things with AI, increase sales, better up the process of the business as far as maybe customer support or whatever they need in that company. So this becomes now an opportunity for people in the US that are looking to uh, scale their wealth really, because at the end of the day, a lot of people don't really know what to do with their capital. They're either going to invest in their capital in real estate, but maybe they're going to invest in their capital in stocks or S&P 500, um, or they're going to just deploy some of their capital in crypto, which is quite volatile and risky for doing some of a short-term investment strategies. Now, if you're looking at buying a business, what's interesting is you can actually control that business. You can have almost 100% ownership of that company, and you could essentially add in value and control the growth of that company, the growth over revenues and profits, which means the growth of the enterprise value. Now, as far as the 7A loan, it's fairly simple. You would get into a deal and you'd put down 5 up to 10% of a purchase price. So let's say the deal is $1 million or $2 million in value. You'd put down 5% out of that purchase price. So out of a million, $50,000. Out of 2 million, it would be at least $100,000. Or it would be um, 10% out of a million, $100,000, or 10% out of 2 million, let's say $200,000, you'd put that down to be able to then get up to 80, 90% loan to value based on that deal, which means the 7A loan lender is going to be able to give you that loan plus some additional working capital to operate the company for you to be able to buy into that company. Now, typically, you want to include some seller financing in some of these deals just to make the seller incentivized to stay with you. And because of the SBA 7A program, the seller financing is typically going to be on full standby for the full amount um, as far as the SBA amortization time. So typically, you're going to go up to 10 years. That means you're going to pay off the loan in 10 years. So based on that scenario, the seller, let's say he has a 10% seller financing note where he's going to need to wait for that 10% for later after the 10 years is paid off. And the reason they do that is because, again, they're motivated to sell and they're getting up to 90% of day one as a payment. So if a company's worth 2 million bucks, they're getting 90% out of that on day one at closing, which is a very beneficial thing for sellers. And they're fairly motivated and they believe you can run the company and they believe that you're an appropriate buyer for them, you're the right type of buyer for them, they'll take that deal and they'll work with you. Now, when it comes down to you being the buyer in the US, buying businesses like that, you could get loans up to $5 million. So there's that limit. There's a lot of intricacies as far as if you're going to be in the same business model, which is the same NAIC code, there's workflows around you getting even more lending. And you can then eventually also combine SBA with other mechanisms, such as a conventional loan or some sort of commercial loan or some sort of alternative financing. So you could potentially acquire a few businesses with that mechanism. And if you have capital set aside, 50,000, 100,000, you might get access to businesses that are worth a few $1 million. Now you could also put 50,000 of a deal, but also raise, let's say, 250,000 from an investor, and now you have 300K to play with, and then you could get a $3 million SBA loan on that. So in total, you'd have $3.3 million to buy an established business. And now you're going to be splitting that deal with that investor, but again, you might have access to a better deal, a better transaction, a better company, a better team, and so forth. So it's up to you and how you want to strategize this. But I think this is a very predictable path now that uh, you can take to be able to get a deal done. Now, of course, it's easier said than done. There's a lot of intricacies related to finding the deal, analyzing the deal, making an offer, negotiating, financing. Just putting this all together takes time and understanding. But at the end of the day, if you have capital set aside and you're looking to deploy it properly, you should look into this opportunity and read about it. You also need to read about default rates on some of these loans. Default rates have been increasing on some of these loans, but at the same time, it's not a huge failure rate on some of these default rates, which means you're kind of well protected. If you go through the approval process and you get a loan, you're in a fairly good situation because the lender is going to do their due diligence, your accountant is going to do your due diligence, your lawyer and the M&A team is going to do the due diligence. You're going to do the due diligence, maybe even a third party is going to do that. So when you're buying the company, you're really buying a company with a legitimate profit and loss statement, legitimate balance sheet, accurate numbers, and a fairly good team. Of course, no business is going to be perfect, and there's always going to be issues. But if you're happy with 80, 90% of the things in that company, and the company is really making solid cash flow, then if you get approved by SBA, that also means that in some cases you're kind of well protected to get into a fairly good deal who's not going to default later on down the road because they would burn up their reputation if the lender doesn't essentially fulfill um, some of their promises, which is giving you the loan, taking care of that loan, and being able to get paid by you. I know of horror stories back in the day and horror stories from different buyers that essentially got into loans and couldn't pay them off, but if you know what you're doing and you are buying in the right company and you're adding value and you know how to add value, you could mitigate that risk by quite a lot. But 7A loan also has personal guarantees involved, which means you're gonna basically personally guarantee that you're gonna need to pay that capital back in time to the SBA 7A lender. Now, again, with a business transaction, if you're getting into a deal, there might be some collateral in the business, there might be some assets in the business. They might take something away from the business if things go south and you're not able to pay this off. And then eventually they'll come after you if they're going to try to make you pay the loan. Uh, Now, again, these are worst cases scenario, and you're not, in most cases, if you're going to look at default rates in US, you're going to realize it's a lot more rare than most people think. And lenders are trying to actually help you if you're working with the right partner. Now, if you want to learn a little bit more about the process, just DM me on LinkedIn on the SBA 7A loan process, and I could connect you to lending partners we have partnerships with so that way you can understand how this works in a lot more granular detail. But in general, yeah, you need to be very aware of how buying a business works. You need to be aware of how the operations work in that particular business model. You need to have some capital set aside and fairly good credit above 700s in US. And you could get a loan like that to be able to go and buy a company. It's an amazing opportunity and most people are sleeping on it. So that's why I wanted to create a video so you can get access to this and get things done. Let me know if this was helpful. Thanks.